Okay, Gretchen, let's talk about Common Core. That's one of the big issues here, obviously in Quincy. That's one of the things that's coming. What is the concern regarding Common Core?
Common Core, there are three basic concerns: cost, control, and the data collection that's necessary in Common Core. The cost, at least in Missouri, I don't know what it here in Illinois, Pioneer Institute has determined that it will cost the state of Missouri, just the state, $350 million. We don't know how much it's going to cost each individual districts. Common Core requires computer assessments, teacher professional development training that is different from what they had been trained before, and the computer infrastructure. Just to do one school in Missouri in a district was $1 million. These are costs that the districts have not budgeted, and they don't know how much it's going to cost. The state has not gone to the legislators yet to ask for an additional $350 million or however much it is. The control, it bypassed state legislators and it bypassed the voters. Unlike No Child Left Behind, which was a congressional act, these are mandates that are stimulus dollar funded. So when the stimulus ends in September of 2014, all that money runs out. You have two private trade organizations, that's the Chief Council of State School Officers and the National Governors Association. They are not governmental organizations. They basically have been funded by the federal government to direct the curriculum, the assessments, and teacher evaluations. The third part of it is the data. It's unprecedented that now information will be gathered on individual students, teachers, and principals. And these students will have data sets. The teachers and principals will be evaluated on how the children do on the assessments. Teachers, it's up to 50%. So if the student doesn't do well or the class doesn't do well, that teacher is graded down regardless of what kind of class makeup he or she has that year. The school district also, the standards and assessments are copyrighted by the two private organizations. So a school district cannot change the standards, nor can they change the assessments. So you have to teach to the assessments to the test and using a specific curriculum that's aligned to Common Core standards.
Besides just the fact that this is a lot of stuff and a lot's going on, my question to you is, why do you think that this is even coming around? It just seems like it's so much more work just to make something like this even be implemented. Why do you think this is coming around?
There's a lot of money in education. Education is a $600 billion industry. Pearson is one of the biggest players in this. Bill Gates has spent a lot of money in this because all the computers are going to have to be Microsoft. It's big business. It has less to do about education than it does with money. Back when I started the blog about 2 years ago or so, I stumbled across a man named Scott Joftis. And Scott Joftis is from Ladue, Missouri, suburb of St. Louis. Now lives in New York City. He's a venture capitalist. A lot of venture capitalists in education that know nothing about education. They are just providing a product that someone has told them, this is what we need, and they are producing it. He said, I realized there was a lot of money to be made in education when I started getting telephone calls from the Middle East to figure out how to fund turnaround schools. That's one of the things that in education, there are grants for turnaround schools, failing schools, and they'll close them, fire everybody, and start a different school. He said, education is the wild, wild west to make money. This is where a lot of the people that lost money in the dot-com bubble now go to education.
Wow. So I'm going to play the devil's advocate with you.
Sure.
Some parents, some adults, maybe even don't even have kids in school, or their kids are really small right now, will say, this is just another change in education. There's all kinds of different things. We had the No Child Left Behind. Now we've got this. What's the big deal? Talk to me as someone maybe who's not informed. Why should I care? Why is this such a big deal?
The most egregious thing about Common Core is it totally goes around our political structure. As I said before, No Child Left Behind did go to a congressional vote. This was decided by the Department of Education and 2 private trade organizations. Your legislators never voted for it, never voted for funding it when the federal stimulus dollars run out. Voters never had a chance to say, yeah, this is a great idea, or no, I don't like it. However, the system is set in place. What's going to happen is you're going to have the state come back and say, now we have this system in place, well, we have to fund it now because we've spent all this time and money doing it, regardless if it's good or not. And another thing I'd like people to understand, Common Core is never been researched, is not evidence-based, it was not field tested, there were no pilot tests, this is theory. So they want us to spend billions of dollars on theories. They say they're going to help these kids become globally competitive for a 21st century job. What's a 21st century job? Who knows? They said they were internationally benchmarked. Everybody said, what countries are you internationally benchmarked? They withdrew that claim. So they've said a lot of things that have not been true. And we find it ironic that they say this system is going to produce data. Well, they don't have any data for what they want us to learn.
One of the other things that we've done a couple of different stories about is one of the things that's always struck my interest, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that the students will kind of set the bar for their own education. Is that correct?
Well, there's a lot of self-direction. The teachers are not really teachers now. They're going to be more type facilitators. What we're hearing about Common Core, they're more interested in the process versus the answer. So in other words, 3 times 4 equals 12. You get 1 point for that. Then you have B, C, and D. You have to graph it out how you came to the answer in 2 different ways. And then in the D area, you have to be very language savvy because you have to explain how you came across that answer. That's the process. Now, if you are a child that has good language, that's great. If your English is second language, you're not going to do well. If you are hearing impaired and you may have a language delay, you're not going to do well. Or if you have a language processing problem, you're not going to do well. But you will be counted down on the answer. 3 times 4 equals 12 is not good enough anymore. You will also be graded on behavioral tendencies. So if you're a 5-year-old boy and you're a little antsy in your seat and you don't make good eye contact, you will be graded down. That will go on that data set. A very important thing to understand about the data. Every child will have a data set that follows that child into the workforce. All of this data will be merged with departments of labor, departments of health, and any other third-party organization or research firm that the Department of Education think needs your child's data. So what we would like people to understand or think about, if your child goes across the threshold of a school, should that school have the right to know things about that child and that family? That is a profound shift in how we think about education. And what is the role of government? Is it to have a data set or a dossier that follows a kid all through their life?
It sounds to me as though you are going to be judged and not given the room to grow as you would normally in education. As you grow and you mature, as you begin to develop, as new challenges come into your life. But with this data information passed on to jobs and passed on to other people, you're going to be judged and not given the chance to show that you've grown, you've matured, you've changed. You'll be judged right out the gate. And
that's a big issue in our minds. People are different. Developmentally, boys particularly, I have two boys, they're now young men. Generally, they are not as good as students early on as the girls are. A lot of times they catch up. Boys have a lot of testosterone. They need to move around. They're not just going to sit there and pay attention. That is very worrisome to us. that you are going to be based on your data set from the time you are in preschool.
Wow, I've never heard that part of it.
That is something that people really latch onto when they understand. Well, you have to have Common Core because you have to have common data sets. You have to have common assessments, because then how can you compare students and states? So that's why common. And I don't think that people are common. We're all different. We all have different talents. We all learn at different rates. I have a son who has a cochlear implant. That's how I got into this, because I realized he learned in a different way. He eventually caught up, but it was different than this child over here, and it's going to be different from that child over there and that child over there. So children are not common. Our education should not be common. School districts should be able to adapt what their kids need. Teachers need to be able to teach the children and not to the test. But the teachers will be teaching to the test because their jobs depend on it, the principal's jobs depend on it, and the superintendent's. So you can see how it's just a domino effect.
Two last questions, because I know our time is probably running out. Knowing the financial aspect of it, the people involved in that sort of thing like that, it seems to me from what you're saying that education and children are being reduced down in a financial mathematical formula to a common denominator. If these things are in place, we should get this result, not taking into account, as you just said, individuality, maybe special needs, things like that. Am I seeing that correctly?
It's more of a jobs training program versus education. That's what we've kind of morphed into. Chambers of Commerce love this because they have been told these will make great workers for your companies. If you read enough educational material, they do not refer to students as students. They are now human capital. And there was an article that I read, and it was a 10-year prediction. The guy wrote it in 2006. He says by 2016, he says, I hate to put it this way, but he said parents and taxpayers want a return on investment in the money that we spend in education. So that's how I look at human capital. It's an ROI. That's what we have to change. We have to have people understand that's not what public education is about. It is not a public-private partnership, and your children are going to be lost. They're not human capital. They are your child, and it is time to stand up and reclaim the power that you have to educate your own child and to have some say-so in how your public school district is run or education is implemented.
So what can a group of people like you tonight, what can you do, what are you trying to do to begin to make a shift, to open people's eyes? What are you doing?
Okay, we're doing an education campaign, number one. Number two, we worked very hard last year in Missouri, and we're working harder this year with a larger group to get bills for data privacy, to slow the implementation of Common Core, to figure out how much it's going to cost, those types of bills. We have on our website a resolution for school boards to take to your school boards. And it is all sourced, the research, the documentation. It can be adapted to Illinois or to any other state, and to say, look, this is a mandate. This is not a law. You don't have to do this. And for the good of your taxpayer, your financial foundation, and for your children, say no. We don't have to do this, and we're not going to do this. We can educate our kids. Thank you very much.